About 10 years ago, a buddy of mine and I decided to go winter camping in the backwoods of Tennessee. I scouted out the area and found a suitable place to camp. As I explored the area, I found a trail that seemed to dead end near our camp. At the end of the trail was 3 circles made from pushed down trees. Think like a big nest. I'm not suggesting that's what they were. In the middle of each circle was a tree stump upside down with its roots in the air. It was really weird. We'd planned to stay 2 nights in that general area. We pitched a tarp over a fallen log. I slept on one side of it, he on the other, with a small fire at one end to circulate warm air. It worked pretty good. As we were chatting in our bags under the tarp, I began to feel a pounding on the ground. It felt like there were horses running toward us. No more than mentioned it to him when suddenly something came crashing through our camp. Again, remember, the fire is still going. We both tried to wiggle out of our mummy bags and get out from under the low-hanging tarp to see what was going on as fast as we could. Both stood up and could hear branches breaking and snapping around us. We backed up from the fire to try to get our eyes adjusted to the dark. Looked beyond the edge of the light. The sound of the branches breaking and snapping suddenly stopped after about 5 or 8 minutes. Needless to say, we didn't sleep well. The next morning, after walking around finally, I asked him what he wanted to do. He told me that from the beginning he felt like we shouldn't be there. Unbeknownst to him, I had been feeling the same way all day before the strange account. We packed up and went home. This is the only trip I have ever returned early from. I've been false charged by a grizzly while salmon fishing in Alaska, and we kept right on camping. I'm not easily spooked, but this was different somehow. It didn't seem natural. I was hiking a section of the North Umpqua Trail, northern part of southern Oregon, a few years back with my friend. It's a 72-mile trail broken into sections that can be easily hiked in a day. At the time, I lived about midway up the trail, fairly remote in a small community. It was mid-fall this one day when we set out. The trail was running along the south side of the Umpqua River. It was pretty up and down in the beginning. We made it to a fairly flat section that was running just above the river. There was this beautiful view of the river through the trees, so we stopped to get some pictures and take a water break. I immediately felt extremely uncomfortable, like someone was watching us. I slowly turned my head to look behind us, across the trail and up a very small incline. Through the trees, I could see a small meadow. Across the meadow, maybe 15 yards from us, was a tent, an old canvas-style tent. As I'm looking, I noticed bones strung from the trees all around the meadow, like creepy death wind chimes. My stomach just clenched and dropped. I leaned into my friend and whispered, "Do not turn around and look behind us. Just continue walking up the trail, then run when I tell you." We were close enough to the river that nobody not right next to us could have heard this. She did exactly as I told her to, setting off at the brisk walk we'd been at before. We got maybe 10 yards. I could hear footsteps through the forest floor, coming from behind and slightly above us. That part of the forest is very dense. There's a thick moss cover under the trees, so footsteps on it make a very specific sound. I leaned forward and told her to pick up her speed. She did, and so did whoever was behind us. I leaned forward again and told her to run as fast as she could, and not stop until I told her to. The 2 middle-aged women, both slightly overweight, we ran like the damn wind. I just kept telling her, "Go, go, go." I could see ahead of us that the trail made an incline and veered to the right along the river and around a cliff. I knew at that point that whoever it was going to have to come down onto the trail or stop. We kept running. We probably ran at least a mile after that, even though we could no longer hear anyone behind or above us. That section of the trail was about 9 miles, and we were not halfway when this happened. We eventually slowed down, but just hurried as fast as we could the rest of the way. We had arranged for her younger brother to pick us up. We made it to the next trailhead fairly early, so we made our way out to 138 and started walking east towards home, knowing he'd find us. He did, and was shocked at our story. We got home and immediately called our local sheriff who lived just above us at the ranger station. He came to the house and heard our story. He explained it might be a day or 2 before they could get in on the trail as they had a missing hunter at the time they were searching for. So a few days go by and he shows up at our house to let me know that we were not crazy or imagining things and someone really did chase us. I asked what they found and who it was. He looked down at the ground and then looked up and said, "I'm not going to tell you what we found or who it was, because if I do, you will never hike anywhere again. What we found was not normal. It will not happen up here again." He then instructed me to never ever hike unarmed again. I never found out what they found or who it was. I never hiked that section of trail again, and it completely burnt last year. I also never hiked unarmed, ever again. That was huge for me as I was not a gun person. I had many incidents living up there in a national forest with wild animals and other strange things, but nothing ever scared me as much as that day. My scariest experience, though, happened at about 4:30 in the morning. It was late spring, so the first morning light wouldn't be visible in the treetops for another 30 or 45 minutes. Another hour past that until sunrise. I was on mile 5. I'm in a low bottom that's wedged between two steep ridges. The trail I'm on was narrow, muddy, completely hemmed in by thick underbrush, young maple, and old oak growth. Focused on the small light from my headlamp. Just one step after the other, zoned out. Then I heard a loud crack, and I froze solid. This is the part I have trouble describing. 4:30 in springtime means I'm the only thing making noise. No birds chirping, nothing. Dead quiet. Mid-step, I froze. When fight or flight kicks in, you have these immediate instinct thoughts. The thought that instantly flashed in my mind as I stood there balancing myself into silence was, if I hear that again, I'm turning around. I'm going back the way I came in a hurry. Why? Because that sound was not a branch breaking, wasn't deadfall, wasn't a widowmaker. I was damn sure I had just heard something intentional. Hearing it twice, well, that meant get out of here. To describe it as best I can, it sounded like a decent-sized wooden stick being violently whacked against a smallish tree. More a fungo bat-sized stick than a baseball bat. The distinction in my head being that this sound was a crack, not a thud or thump. And I've described it as explosive in the past, because it was so sudden, so terribly loud. I had the sense that it was about 50 yards directly in front of me, and it was loud and clear. Now, as I stood there, completely spooked, I realized the soon-to-be worst part of my situation. I knew where the sound came from, and I knew where the trail went. In about 30 yards, I was going to come to a 180-degree turn and start up the ridge going away from the creek. This meant, as soon as I got the courage to move towards this noise, I was going to have to turn my back to it and get up that ridge. This made me very nervous. My head somewhere between meth fiend murder and Bigfoot bludgeoning. Minutes pass. I just breathe my foggy breath into my glasses and listen. Nothing. Dead quiet. I've got about 20 or 30 minutes until first light. I crank up the headlamp and start to slowly creep to the 180 turn. When you wear a headlamp in the woods at night, every tree branch in front of you casts a big black moving shadow on the trail. It didn't help. I get to the turn and quickly make the bend. I'm moving pretty fast at this point, trying to be quiet, taking tiny, shallow breaths so I can listen while humping it up the trail. And then I smell it. A stench hits me that I can't describe. I just imagined wet, rotten, death. I've actually worked scenes where humans have expired in a past life as a firefighter. This was like days-old decomposition, but it just smelled strange. I kept walking fast. By the time I made the top of that ridge, I was huffing and the first light was showing. I didn't stop moving until full light was out and the birds were chirping. I've heard it all in our woods. I've smelled it all. I'm telling you, I don't know what the hell that was. Deadfall, and especially leafed-out branches, make a lot of noise on the way down. I've heard it many times. But to this day, I still don't know what that noise was, or who made it.